FDR's First New Deal. The term First New Deal was in his inaugural speech to help him improve America for each individual of America. He wrote the Federal Securities Act, Tennessee Valley Authority Act, Civilian Conservation Corps Act, Federal Emergency Relief Act, Agricultural Adjustment Act, Thomas Amendment to the Agriculture Adjustment Act. The 100 Days were FDR's first 3 months in presidency, where he made the foundations of the First New Deal.
Just take those old records off the shelf. I'll sit and listen to them by myself. Today's music ain't got the same soul. I like that old time rock and roll. Don't try to take me to a disco. You'll never even get me out on the floor. 10 minutes I'll be late for the door. I like that old time rock and roll. Still like that old time rock and roll. The kind of music just soothes my soul. I reminisce about the days of old with that old time rock and roll.
Roosevelt was a man of action. He began working his first day in office. He had promised the American people a New Deal, and it was a promise he intended to deliver.
The New Deal is hard to describe. There are several things that it's not. It's not Franklin Roosevelt. Roosevelt's policies and his ideas get embodied in the New Deal, but Roosevelt is not the sole source of the New Deal and its ideas. The New Deal is developed by various people in the federal government, in the executive branch, and it's also the result of efforts by Congress. Roosevelt winds up embodying those successful efforts, typically embracing them, but they're not. It doesn't all originate with Roosevelt.
The New Deal was a series of programs crafted by experts. They provided what people needed most: jobs, money, and help to keep their homes and farms.
I think the central element of the New Deal is a commitment to action. It is the central characteristic here that something had to be done and that government needed to respond to try to devise policies and programs that would make a difference.
The day after his inauguration, Roosevelt made a bold move. He closed the nation's banks.
Will Rogers joked that when Franklin Roosevelt closed the banks, he was only one step ahead of the depositors, because what had been happening is that there had been a run as investors fled in panic to their banks. Seeing a line outside a bank would attract dozens, hundreds of people, all demanding their deposits out of the banks. And as they removed more currency from the economy, they constrained the economy even more.
Under the new legislation passed by Congress, bank examiners toured the country, determining which banks could remain open, which needed help, and which needed to be closed. Then, Roosevelt used his first fireside chat to assure the American people that the banks were finally secure for the first time in 3 years. With banking stabilized, Roosevelt's administration began to create programs aimed at stabilizing the economy and helping it to recover. In March, they established the Civilian Conservation Corps. In May, they instituted the Federal Emergency Relief Act, Emergency Farm Mortgage Act, Agricultural Adjustment Act, Tennessee Valley Authority Act, and Truth in Securities Act. And in June, they passed the Homeowners Loan Act and the National Industrial Recovery Act. All of these programs were intended to help the American people, each from a slightly different angle. The Civilian Conservation Corps, or CCC for short, put people to work outside, and at the same time improved the American landscape.
One of the things that Roosevelt did right away is start the CCC, which was the Civilian Conservation Corps, in which he tried to take what he called the wild boys of the road, who had been forced from their homes because they were single young males, and gave them employment in the national parks and the national monuments, doing conservation for the national forests, and a portion of their pay was sent home to their families.
Casually known as the Tree Army, the CCC planted millions of trees. They cleared trails through national parkland and built shelters and picnic sites. But their most ambitious project was creating a shelter belt, a forest that stretched south from the Canadian border all the way to the panhandle of Texas. In May, Congress passed the Emergency Farm Mortgage Act and the Agricultural Adjustment Act to help farmers who were losing their property at an alarming rate. 20,000 farmers lost their land each month because they couldn't pay their debts. Within a year and a half, the Emergency Farm Mortgage Act had helped 20% of farmers refinance their farms, and the Agricultural Adjustment Act provided money to offset the losses caused by lower prices. The Tennessee Valley Authority Act, or TVA, provided government funding to develop the Tennessee Valley. The TVA built dams to control flooding and generate cheap electricity. It also manufactured fertilizer, dug channels, conserved soil, reforested land, and transformed the Tennessee Valley environmentally and economically. The Homeowners Loan Corporation, which Congress approved in June, helped 20% of Americans refinance their homes instead of losing them to the banks.